All right, Doug, it's your first time here on Talk the North. Can you provide the listeners a little bit of a professional background?
Sure, I can do that. Thanks for having me on. I'm Doug Lloyd. I'm the Eaton County prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor for 30 years. For the last 13 years or so, since 2013, I have been the elected prosecutor in Eaton County. Eaton County is the west side of Lansing. And I got into this race because I truly believed at a ground level that I wasn't liking what I was seeing happening at the state level. And I thought that the Attorney General's office should really bring back some accountability and integrity to it. So I decided to run.
And what are some of those experiences in your career as Eaton County prosecutor that have prepared you for the role of Attorney General?
Sure. Well, I mean, 30 years, it's amazing all the things you've done. I was a docket attorney. I was the drug prosecutor. I've been an arson prosecutor. Here in Eaton County, I helped start our economic crime unit where we focused on crimes that were against businesses as well as consumer protection. So we handled a lot of contractor fraud, welfare fraud. Also the leadership aspects. I worked my way up through the Eaton County Prosecutor's Office by running our economic crime unit and being our chief assistant, and then for the last 13 years, running the office as the elected official.
I think voters are looking at states like Minnesota, seeing just how much fraud has been exposed in the past several months, and maybe worried that some of the same nonsense is going on here in Michigan. Do you have any goals for rooting out any possible corruption, maybe some you might already be aware of?
Sure, we do, and that's one of the responsibilities of the Attorney General is to actually look for those things. You have your local prosecutors, and they're charged with handling the crimes in their community, but your Attorney General should be looking at those aspects of crimes that are happening across the state. And we've already seen it. We saw a woman down in the Grand Rapids area who was convicted federally of actually taking grant money and then turning around and claiming that she had daycare centers that never opened. When she was convicted by the federal government, it was the restitution amount in over $1 million. The question you got to ask is, why did it take the federal government to actually find that? We have state departments that are here in the state that are charged with actually looking for that crime. The Attorney General's office has assistant attorney generals who are embedded in those departments. I want to see us do better. I want to see us actually focus on the things that are hurting the citizens here in Michigan and making sure that we are protecting those dollars that matter so much to us, because us as taxpayers are paying for these services that occur. We need to know that the services are actually being performed correctly.
What role would you play in election integrity?
Well, I often break this down, and that's the amazing thing. I've been in this race for about a year. I was honored to receive the endorsement by the delegates back in March. And at the same time, Anthony Forlini received the endorsement for the Secretary of State. And Anthony and I look at it as kind of a multifaceted aspect. It's Tony's job as the Secretary of State to actually make sure that elections are transparent, that they're actually, moving forward with that sunshine. But if there's fraud, then that becomes the responsibility of the Attorney General's office to actually take that, investigate it, and prosecute. We've seen it now where our current Secretary of State has actually sent cases to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office isn't doing anything with them. I think people need to be held accountable. If we want our elections safe, then we need to make sure that we're actually electing a Secretary of State who's going to care about that transparency, and we need to make sure that we elect an Attorney General who's not going to be afraid to actually look at the individuals who are committing that fraud, who are taking away our election integrity. And we're going to prosecute those people, because that's how you hold people accountable.
Something really important to our listeners here in northern Michigan and the eastern Upper Peninsula is the Line 5 issue. Current Attorney General Dana Nessel, very opposed to it, has taken action against it. How would you handle the Line 5 issue? Would it be much of the same? Would it be different?
Oh, it'll be different. That's the thing, Nick, that I've had the opportunity to do is I've probably put 60,000 miles on my car so far in this, campaign. been to almost every county in the state, listened to people from Menominee all the way down to Branch County. And that is an issue that everybody talks about is Line 5. And it's interesting because, I'll ask some people and going, okay, Line 5 doesn't touch you. Take the west side, west coast of the state, northern Michigan. But they're still concerned because they're using propane. They're using gas to heat their homes. And that's the frustration I've had, not only as just a person who lives in the state, but also, running in this office, is that they decided to bring forward these lawsuits with no plans of what they were going to do for the Upper Peninsula if Line 5 was cut off. You can't do that. You have the Upper Peninsula people who are worried that if Line 5 is just shut down, how are they going to get their gas? How are they going to actually be able to heat their homes? I think it's kind of important that we be able to do that. And so for me, I've already made it clear that those lawsuits aren't going to proceed under Doug Lloyd, because you don't just bring a lawsuit when you don't have a secondary idea of how you're going to make it better for our citizens. So this was nothing but political to me. It was something that the current Attorney General just wanted to do, but no one bothered to think, how are we going to take care of our citizens if all of a sudden we just cut off Line 5?
What do you think the Attorney General's working relationship with the governor should be?
It's funny that you say that. There was a candidate, months ago who came to me and said, well, I'm looking for the guy who's going to work for me the best. And I had to, politely say to him that, sir, it's not the Attorney General's job to work for the governor. I'll work with you if you're doing the right thing. I'll work against you if you're doing the wrong thing. But the Attorney General's job is to represent 10 million people in the state. I don't work for the governor. I don't work for any other agency. The Attorney General is autonomous, and the Attorney General's job is to protect the 10 million people of the state, not work for one specific elected official.
Yeah, so it's it sounds like that individual in this case had a bit of a misunderstanding of the Office of Attorney General, and I think maybe everyday Michiganders also might be a little confused on what the Attorney General does day in, day out, because they might be analyzing it from a perspective of, oh gosh, we hear all these stories of soft on crime policies across the state of Michigan. You get somebody with a rap sheet as long as a CVS receipt, getting released from jail for the 12th time, and then goes and commits a heinous crime. And so they probably bring that up to you. But what really is the role of the Attorney General, and especially in scenarios like that, because you're not the one individually prosecuting all of these cases, of course. So what role do you have in ensuring, maybe guiding other prosecutors across the state, setting standards? What's your role when people come up to you and say, what's your response when they say to you, I feel like we're getting soft on crime?
Well, obviously, I tell them to look at their individual counties and how it proceeds. As the Eaton County prosecutor, I can tell you that, it's very important to my constituents that we actually hold people accountable. And it's important that you look at each case individually as to, is this a situation while holding this person accountable, we're going to make sure that when they come out the other side, that they're, actually going to be a good, productive citizen? Or is this someone that is actually affecting our public safety of our community, and that person needs to go away? And so the Attorney General should really be there to support. And I think that's important up here in northern Michigan. You have a lot of great prosecutors up here, a lot of great law enforcement. That's why, Nick, that I'm actually endorsed by over 60 prosecutors across the state, dozens of sheriffs, almost every law enforcement group has endorsed me, because they understand that they're looking for that support, that partner who is actually going to help bring back the accountability, to a person who actually commits a crime. And I feel that we have actually gone in that direction at a state level, where crime has not seemed to be that important. And I always make the statement that, the Attorney General is responsible for a lot of things. Handling crime is part of it. Working with each governmental agency is another piece of it. Protecting the state from lawsuits is another part. But you know what? As I've traveled the state over the last year, it's funny. No one actually asked me who I'm going to sue. But a lot of people ask me, who am I going to prosecute? So prosecution is important to our citizens, and I want to make sure that as the Attorney General, I'm actually bringing that support to your local law enforcement so that they can do their job in the most effective way for their citizens and their community.
If elected on day one, are there a couple of things that you plan on working on immediately?
Well, you brought up one of them, right? Line 5. There's a lot of lawsuits out there that this particular Attorney General has decided to become a part of that I feel need to be looked at, with a new eye, and making the determination, are these lawsuits actually for the benefit of Michigan? If they're not for the benefit of Michigan residents, then why are we in them? To me, that seems like that's a political reason that you're involved if you're not actually benefiting the citizens. So we've got to look at those. And I also feel that an alignment of that office needs to occur. I've heard many horror stories from people who are attempting to deal with the Attorney General's office where they feel they're waiting for years to get a response. Tony Ferlini is Secretary of State. He's the Macomb County Clerk. I'm the Eaton County Prosecutor. We always say our jobs are about customer service. Well, that's what they should be at the Attorney General's office as well. We're here to serve all 10 million people. And if you're making people wait around in order to find out whether they may be helped, well, you're not doing your job.
The Attorney General race, and you mentioned it, the Secretary of State race as well. It skips the primary as they're nominated by the parties. You mentioned that earlier. So you're essentially running a much longer general election campaign against your opponent, which in your case is Ellie Savitt. Do you find that beneficial or more challenging?
I actually find it beneficial. I appreciate our party actually doing that because it gives us the opportunity to really get out there and talk to all the citizens. And that's important to me. I have been so honored as I travel the state to meet so many wonderful people. All of these people I now call friends, actually get out there and hear what are the concerns of Michiganders, the people who live here. Yeah, it's one thing when you're, with your own party, but, it's more than just your own party. There's other people who are going to vote that, don't always show up to a local Republican meeting. So having that extra time to get out and actually do that, I was honored to have a law enforcement meet and greet here in Petoskey this morning. And just being able to get out and, hear the concerns of the sheriff, the local prosecutor, of other, county officials, seeing the citizens who showed up just to say, hey, these are our concerns. That's what matters to me. Because as I said, the Attorney General is supposed to be here representing all 10 million people. If you're not listening to what their concerns are, then how are you going to know what to do?
And along those same lines, why do you think you're a better choice than your opponent? What's the argument for why people should vote for you over Ellie?
Well, it comes down to, are you looking for social justice or public safety? I'm a firm believer that the Attorney General is supposed to follow the rule of law. The Attorney General is supposed to enforce the law. You've seen for the last 8 years that this current Attorney General has a strong desire to actually try to rewrite the law, to go after her political opponents. Well, my opponent's actually endorsed by even more progressive people, both locally and nationally. And that, to me, that's not where Michigan's at. Michigan wants a community that feels safe. Michigan businesses want to thrive so that they can actually help the state grow. That's what we should be looking at, is actually making Michigan better, making it where people are proud to have this as their home. We don't need to tear it down. We don't need to go with some kind of socialistic ideas. Let's keep Michigan the way it used to be. And that way is the way of Doug Lloyd for Attorney General, not my opponent.
And you mentioned you were here in Petoskey this morning. Any other stops in northern Michigan or the UP coming up?
Well, I'm sure over the next 96 days there will be a lot. I know I am in Charlevoix tomorrow morning before heading down to Detroit. That's the thing, Nick. A lot of people don't realize that if you're just rolling up 27 or 75 or 31, The state seems big. Well, take a side road, and you'll be amazed at how much bigger this state is. And so it's really, been my responsibility, I thought, to make sure that we got out and let everyone actually have the opportunity to talk to us. And for me, that means that you must be in northern Michigan as well, because I wouldn't hear about a lot of the issues that businesses have and that people are concerned about if I hadn't been willing to actually travel to meet and talk to people.
Final question for you. Where can people connect with you and your campaign?
Sure. The easiest way is to go to votedouglloyd.com. That's my website. If you're on social media, I'd start out with Facebook at Doug Lloyd Prosecutor. Between those two, that's going to let you know where we've been, where we're going, our policies, as well as some of kind of the fun stuff that we've done, because, I think it's important that I make sure that I realize, that I'm here for my constituents. In Eaton County, that means that I'm here for all of those constituents who have elected me. I want the state of Michigan to realize that I am as well. They can follow that, on Facebook and at our website and really see, what's Doug Lloyd about and what's he going to bring for the citizens of Michigan.
We are speaking with Republican candidate for Attorney General Doug Lloyd. Doug, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you having us here. Thank you very much.